Good evening, everyone. Let me make sure I have the right click direction. Okay, great. All right, well, thanks for having me at the State of the District presentation. I'm Dr. Caroline Pate-Hefty. All means all in our district, and that's been our motto for the last 5 years. This is, again, my 5th year in Whitewater. We moved here. I drove up in my license plates tonight with left Illinois. My husband's really proud of that. Our 3 kids live in Whitewater schools. My son Jack is a senior this year and our state champ in cross country and track, glowing proud. And Jack will be going to the U.S. Navy Academy, so go Navy, beat Air Force.
Oh.
We'll have a good competition here. All right, so a little slide in our graphics there. So for the 24-25 school year, just to give you a little rundown of what the schools are looking like in our State of the Union. We have about 1,939 students in our child count in September. We do have a high transiency rate in accordance with the state of Wisconsin, so we expect that to be just like last year and the other 4 years, just over 2,000 by the end of the year. We are seeing an influx and increase of our learners at Lincoln Elementary, and so those numbers are getting higher. We're at about 50% economically disadvantaged. That has risen in the last 5 years. We're seeing it level off a little bit. The way that the state is categorizing that number is changing, so we're seeing a hold on that from the last year. About 20% English language learner, and an English language learner means that another language other than English is spoken inside the home. And then about 20% of students with disabilities. And we're going to talk about that number a little bit later. That is higher than the state average. As a district, we've identified that as a problematic area, and that's one of the reasons that we've taken on a literacy initiative, and you're going to hear about that in a little bit. Our largest 2 categories are white students, 53%, and 37% Hispanic Latino. Thank you to our school board who volunteer. I see many of their faces here this evening, and service to our community and district. I share this information. It's critical that, and we talk about you being here voting. 2 of our school board members are up for re-election. There'll be an election in April, and we will have a referendum on the ballot. We're not here tonight to speak about that, but our schools are in the 30-year mark from building, and so we are at the point where we have some significant needs related to roofs, HVAC, safety, and some changes at the high school. One of the things I'm always proud of and that brought me to Whitewater and many of our staff 5 years ago was an inclusion statement. So you'll see inclusion statements around the state and nationally in districts now, and those were often adopted after 2020. Interestingly enough, this inclusion statement was adopted in the early 2000s, so we were jet setters back then, but I think it's critical that we talk about staunchly protecting the rights of all people, every student, every day, in a unified way, and our staff are really proud of this commitment. So for you as our citizens, it's important for you to know how our staff feel because they're who's serving our 2,000 kids. And so our staff look forward to coming to work most days. This was a survey we did last year. About 90% of our staff responded to the survey, just shy of 90% responded to the survey, and this is how they're feeling about coming to work. When we worked with an outside agency to complete this data, a 70% response rate is about an average for the state of Wisconsin. 88.9% of our staff are saying that they look forward to coming to work most days. And working with kids is always a tough job, so that's a really impressive number. And that's up 1.9% from the prior year. Our staff, teachers go into education because they love learning, right? They were successful in schools and they feel that that's an important piece. So in response to, I have opportunities to learn and develop in meaningful ways, 83% of our staff said they agree or strongly agree. And that's up 5% from the prior year. The district is making consistent progress on our goals and initiatives. 81% of our staff say, yes, we're making progress. They agree or strongly agree, and that's up 9% from the prior year. Everyone seems to be working towards the same goal of making a difference in the lives of students. That's what gets us out of bed in the morning as educators. 89% of us said we agree or strongly agree that that's the case, and that's up almost 5% from the prior year. One of the things that we as a community have committed to that I contribute a lot of those positive numbers from is working as what we call a PLC, or a professional learning community. And professional learning communities, it sounds like a term, and it is a term we use in education, but it means that we use an ongoing process to talk about data, about kids. That sounds really easy. But when you think about us having 3 elementaries, a middle school and a high school, that means making sure that we have time set aside for our teachers to be talking about the best way to improve student outcomes. So anytime our administrators come into a room, we're looking for our teachers to be talking about these 4 questions, and they define what a professional learning community is. What do we want students to know? How will we know if they've learned it? What will we do for students who didn't or need more support? And how do we enrich the learning of students who have already learned it? And so we can walk into a room of teachers talking during what used to be considered planning time, and this is what we're talking about. And that's how we're making movement in our outcomes for kids. Our elementary math model initiated 3 years ago, and so you can see the start of that data on the forward assessment, the state assessment in the state of Wisconsin. 35% in 2022 of our students were proficient in math on the forward, and we've moved that in 2 years to 49% proficiency. And we're not done yet. We talked a little bit about that special education number, and I'm a special educator by trade. I was very concerned when I arrived here about the high percentage of students with learning disabilities being served here. That's an indication of a problem with your reading model. And so what it means is we're missing a significant amount of kids in that process. So when about 3 years ago, our students, K-5, 26% of them were reading on target. That's a really scary number. That means we were missing a lot of students. So our staff committed to this. That wasn't okay with them either. At that time, we had over 15-year-old reading curriculum. You can imagine research around reading has changed quite a bit. And our materials were piecemealed. Bless our teachers, because they were having to put things together when it came to instructing reading. And you can imagine that it also meant that we weren't doing the same thing from classroom to classroom. So I could go in a classroom at Lincoln or a classroom at Washington, and instruction looked completely different. That's not the case anymore. So 2 years ago, we made a commitment to what we call the science of literacy, our science of reading, and that process really means a lot of you were taught using phonics. And for a long period of time, phonics went away in education and research. So we were not teaching phonetically students how to read. And that is why when you see that huge percentage of special education, some kids need that in order to access language. And I see a lot of people shaking their heads like your kids and grandkids probably miss this piece. So when we analyzed that as a teaching staff, we added that piece back in, and I'm proud to say we did that over a year in advance of Wisconsin's legislation requiring that. And our teachers have really committed to that process, K-5, and we're seeing huge improvements. So that 26% where we started has now moved to 42% of our kids reading on target. And at the end, we don't have the next set of data, but we are anticipating that this will continue to increase significantly. Another piece, and I love being able to talk to community members so you can remind your kids, aunts, or nieces, nephews to get to school because we have a national crisis. We can't improve outcomes for students if they're not coming to school. And so we have a campaign after COVID to really make sure students are attending. So this is our middle school data alone. You saw some information about elementaries, but over in last school year, we missed over 1,237 days at the middle school. That's significant absenteeism. So we were at a 15% absenteeism rate. This also significantly impacts our report card. We need kids attending, and that's an outcome that Wisconsin has prioritized on the school report card. So we buckled down as an administrative team. We put tiers of intervention together for families. We're working directly with our SRO, and we've reduced that number significantly. Still too many, folks. 826 days is something we're really working hard on to improve this year. We need kids in school, but we're down to a 9.73, which is below the state average. Some numbers at our high school that I'm really proud of. We hit the highest ACT composite in 5 years here. So our high school principal likes to use the example that our expectation used to be that if you were a weightlifter, you came in the weight room and bench pressed 190 pounds with no practice. You'd be hurting the next day. And so what we were asking of kids when they came in to take the ACT was to bench press 190 pounds because we weren't practicing. So we initiated a program last year that involved incentives. Kids really got into it. They loved the rewards. It was called CERT, It helps kids kind of look at their career tracks. It's a computer program, and you can see our pre and post data of our juniors last year. So the blue is the pre, and then them move their actual outcomes. So they were really working in the weight room, practicing here. So a really impressive outcome, and our highest outcome almost at the state average here in 2024. Whoops, I went the wrong direction, pardon me. All right, so here's where we are, again, above the state average with our high school outcomes. If you have a student in high school, you know that we have an incentive plan for students to attend. When our students are late, we ask that they give us their favorite thing in the world. Do you know what that is? Their phone, yeah. So when they miss minutes and they're late for high school, they trade their phone for those minutes. And you can imagine the incentive we have for kids to be on time. It's really working. I'm glad I'm not the person that has to take phones. But talk a little bit about other high school outcomes. There's significant research to show that students involved in AP classes or dual credit classes, which means they're beginning to look at college level work, is really critical for outcomes. So those kids are going to be more successful in high school. You can see that we've made significant improvements in the last couple of years, a 23% increase just last year alone of students participating in AP. It's really important. That comes from a lot of talking from our teachers telling kids they need to try it, right? Kids are afraid of this, so this is something we've improved significantly. I love this. Dual enrollment means that students are actually walking away, not just trying, they're walking away with college credit. Look at this increase in dual enrollment classes. We're now up to 402 students that have taken a class that they're gonna leave here and have college credit. We only have 500 and something students at the high school, so that's really exciting. That AP number, whoops, did I go backwards again? Pardon me. Okay, CTE work-based learning are students that are actually able to be out learning in an apprenticeship on a job or getting a certificate. So that is a number that has increased significantly at the high school to 21 students last year. Students that walk away with an industry-recognized credential that can help them actually obtain a job has moved in 2 years from 4 students to 40 students. I'm going to jump past that because I want to share a different story with you. And so you've seen significant growth in the district, and one of the huge things that we do as a part of our professional learning culture is talk about our students feeling comfortable and safe in our schools. And as an educator, I want to share with you tonight the story of the Maasai warriors and their communication. Maasai warriors are the most fierce warriors and in northern Tanzania. They're intelligent fighters, and they're well known through history. When they greet each other in their communication, they don't say, "How are you?" or "Good morning," like we do. And we typically have a standard answer for that in Western cultures. Instead, they ask Kasarian and Gary, which means, "How are the children?" And what they know as a society in their Maasai culture is if the children are well, then the society is well. And I can share with you that the children in WUSD are well, and that makes Whitewater a good place to be. So thank you. Don't go away.
Okay, we have a lot to be proud of in our education system. Questions that you have?
Thank you. I'm just interested, you talked about inclusion and you said that it's an emphasis, an area of emphasis and importance for you. And I'm just thinking back about the past year or so and some of the issues that emerged. Wondering what the status is of that now. How does inclusion and diversity function in a board that really isn't as united or wasn't as united probably as it should have been? And I'm just, can you speak to that kind of an issue?
So I heard you kind of mention two things. One, how are we doing with inclusion? And you mentioned issues, and I would say that that's not an issue in WUSD. And that comes from our leaders, our board, and direct belief in all means all, and that it's every student every day in a unified way. We have had to do a significant shift in the last 5 years, which I love being a part of, and the staff who are here, you can see love being a part of. in order to reach all kids. So if you're referring to our increase in changing dynamic in our community, increased EL population, we're learning how to serve them. And you can see in our data that serving them serves all kids. And so the strategies that we use to teach students who have language needs help every child in the classroom. And so if that's what you're referring to.
That's part of it. I'm interested in the diversity kinds of issues as well, and some of the book things that you were involved with last year and the legal actions and so on and so forth between members of the board and yourself. Mm-hmm. Where is that? What's the status of that?
We have a fantastic board president who has done a great job leading our staff and our community and our board to focus on kids. And I'm really proud to lead under her.
Have you thought at all about the status of bargaining with the teachers in light of the Supreme Court decision? Is that going to change?
So what she's referring to is there's some questionable changes in Act 10 that may impact bargaining in school systems. Right now, our guidance really is that the particular lawsuit in a particular school district may or may not impact bargaining. So we're not running or making changes on anything that we do at this point.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Can you say a little bit more about how the school corporation is,
The school board?
the school corporation is taking care of our new immigrants in the community?
Oh, sure. Okay, so the question was how we're taking care of students in the community, our new populations.
Yeah.
So in school systems, we refer to, I think what you're referring to is called newcomers. And the rate of newcomers in the school district has significantly lowered. A newcomer is someone new to the country. Here's another great education piece. But what we typically measure in school systems is called English language learners. And that simply means that there's a language other than English spoken in the home. My husband is fluent in ASL, American Sign Language. And so my children could be ELs, right? And so they've been exposed to a language other than English. So I'm really careful not to intermix those terms. We did have an influx of newcomers into the schools in 2021. And that has leveled out. And like I said, when I was responding before, we have figured out how to teach them. When that influx happened, we had 3 EL teachers in the entire district. And our board has been extremely supportive of increasing staffing and making sure that we have the right people serving them. But we're also teaching all teachers to be language teachers, and that impacts everyone. Does that help answer?
I don't want to monopolize, but what you're saying just brings up another issue for me.
I'm sorry.
What you're saying just brings up another issue a little bit. When you reach out in your inclusion program and your absentee program as well, that's been an issue, of course, like you say, that's nationwide. But where does the status of the social workers in the district? How many do you have, and how much outreach do they do with the community and the parents?
Sure.
And addressing those issues, I guess.
Absenteeism is a huge component of educational process right now, teaching parents the importance of being at school, and that is not just newcomers. It is all families that struggle after COVID. That's actually a staffing issue for corporations and cities for adults, right? And so people changed the way we do business after COVID. And kids were comfortable learning at home, and so we have kids that want to just kind of make that choice, right? But what we know is that socially they need to be in school around other kids. So I'm sorry if I'm getting out of line with your question. Social workers, we have 3 district-wide social workers. We have a dean of students at Lincoln who's also a trained social worker and bilingual. And then we have a counselor in every building that services kids. And I'll tell you, that's never enough for student needs. They're very, very busy people. And students have needs all day long. We also are on pretty cutting edge, doing pretty cutting edge work with a school psychiatrist who we use through CCTV programming in Fort Atkinson Hospital. So our students and their families can actually get psychiatric services in our schools as well. So it's pretty cutting edge, and we're really excited to be piloting it. It's never enough, but we are well staffed.
And what do you anticipate in the next year
I anticipate for changes.
in terms of changes?
I anticipate that we are going to really figure out this reading thing. I'm really proud of our staff and what we're doing with kids. Walking into classrooms, teachers are confident about what's going on in reading. Now at that 50% mark, that means we're advancing students proficiently in reading. This school year, we'll actually be having reading programming through summer school, so kids can be reading all year. We want to be one of the districts that does not show a summer school reading drop. And so I'm confident that's the direction we're moving. There's a lot of things going on in education changing, and so we'll see what happens with changes in administration. In my last presentation, someone said, well, what if you fall under the department, there's communication that will fall under the Department of Defense, and my response was that public schools have existed for a very long time. So no matter what department we fall under, we'll continue to educate kids.
Public schools are going to exist for a long time. Just remembering what I thought in mind. What about open enrollment? How's open enrollment impacting you, and where are most of those kids going?
Yeah,
The question was about open enrollment for the recording.
sure. So open enrollment is, it's something that all school districts in Wisconsin are weighing. Our largest percentage of open enrollment is probably Elkhorn and Milton, closest suburbs, or closest areas. We contact all of our open enrolled families each year. Each of their decisions are very personal and private to them as to their reasons. We are at a threshold where the percentage of students enrolled in and out actually subsidizes us and provides some funding. So we're in a really good place with open enrollment. If all of the students returned that were open enrolled, we would look at having to increase staffing. We have drawn back the percentage of students that left during COVID. So I would say that that's balanced out to pretty typical numbers historically for us.
Of those that are, you say Milton and Elkhorn as public school systems, but, I'm sorry, you said Elkhorn and Milton as the public school systems that are probably getting the interchange a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What about those who are involved with parochial schools or private schools? Do you have any idea what that, where they?
I'd be glad to come out with your stat. It is a very small percentage of that population. We don't have a lot, like Delavan is highly populated with private religious schools, and so that hits them. It does not hit Whitewater as hard. There's a small percentage, but it's not much of the open enrollment percentage in private or religious.
Okay.
Okay,
Can you,
well,
can you just say what reading program or activity you use?
sure. It's called Structured Literacy, and it's under the Science of Reading Research. And so that's the blanket or umbrella of reading that we do. It targets the 5 areas of literacy. And then if what you're asking is which actual curriculum we selected within that, we use HMH, or Houghton Mifflin reading. But HMH is just a piece of that because we also use a phonics program to make sure kids are moving and using phonics. Did that answer that? Okay.
Glad you're going back to phonics.
The kids love it.
Well, hey, I don't have a question, I have a comment. I just want to, my comment is that that attendance decrease, or whatever we want to call it, going down to 9 point or whatever, that's a huge deal, and it probably impacted the ACT scores, probably impacts the happiness in the schools. I just want to say that's a really big deal. So thank you.